All right, there we go. Recording has started. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our second Pizza, Beer, and Conversations discussion for the 2001-2002 season. Our first conversations was with Father Joe Muth, where we talked about Pope Francis' book, Let Us Dream. This one is about synodality, Let Us Dream with youth and young adults. So despite it saying with youth and young adults, I mean, we're going to be talking about the realities of them. This talk is really for the adults in the room. And I'll kind of go further into detail and what that means is that this synodality was to able to listen to young people, but for us as a church to build a co-responsible ministry with them. So, I talk to the young people on a regular basis, but I don't necessarily talk to many of you on a regular basis about these particular things. So really trying to make those connections into how do we move in a space together to really build what it really means to be synodal, as Pope Francis would like us to do. So I'd like to start with the prayer, which was taken from a guide called Pathway to Accompaniment. I was able to be a contributor to that document. So it's nice to kind of use things from it. It was based off of Pope Francis' exhortation, which we'll also talk about later. But we'll start in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Your word is a lamp for my light, a light for my path. Lord, your words guide our path forward as we seek to accompany young people today. As you call us to be filled with compassion, may we set forth on the pathway of pastoral care. As we continue the journey in the caravan, may we seek the pathway of synodality. As you are present in every one of the least ones, may we discover the pathway of the people as you call all people to go, therefore. May we set out on the pathway of mission. Holy Spirit, infuse our minds with the memories of the pathways that we ourselves have traveled, that we might not forget our own experiences of traveling the road of youth and young adulthood. Lord, help us to be the light to the world, the light which illuminates the pathways for young people to journey closer to you. And through our support and accompaniment, come to know you more fully. We ask this through Lord Jesus Christ, who lives and reigns in the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen.
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 Yeah.
Alrighty, now for the task at hand. So the big point of this is, everyone knows that there is a synod on synodality coming up. At least I hope they know. If you don't know, you gotta know. But before that synod, there was a previous synod back in 2018. This was a synod known as the Youth Synod on Young People, Faith, and Vocational Discernment. This was the 15th General Assembly of Synod of Bishops, right? This is the 15th time that they've gathered as a body to discuss a particular issue. The previous two synods, synod before this was a synod on families, which it seemed like the main thing that kind of came up on that is whether or not that you can give communion to divorced couples. At least that's what it seems. But there's more about that. But anyway, and the previous synod before that was the one on a new evangelization. That after that synod, we began to hear words such as new evangelization, encounter, meeting at the margins, field hospital, like all these different terms. And our favorite term, be missionary disciples, that came out of that synod in Pope Francis' document. He himself wasn't in charge of the actual synod gathering, but he did write a document in which we've gotten many things from that particular synod. So this was his second one in the line, but third one kind of writing the document for it. This particular one, though, was focused on the ages of 16 to 30. This is the international definition of what youth is. Like, we in America think of youth very differently. Youth is described as middle and high school, so that's 14 to 18 years old. And then after 18, you're a young adult, which can last from 18 to 39. But they really looked at the international definition. But we in the American church kind of adapted it to our own needs. So, and you'll kind of see how we did that. But when you hear the word youth, internationally, that means this age of 16 to 30. So high school into early young adulthood. Here's a general timeline of the process. So July 2016, Pope Francis did World Youth Day in Krakow, Poland. This was his second World Youth Day he attended, but I don't know, it seemed to give him inspiration. I was actually here at that World Youth Day. So I did not see Pope Francis with my own eyes per se. I did see him on the screen. I did hear his voice. He was in the vicinity, but he was there talking to the young people and really sowing the seeds of what the synodal process was going to be. And then in the October of that year, he launched the synod process for young people with faith and vocational discernment. So July, October, roll out the process, and then preparatory document as like the one we got a few weeks ago with this new Senate was released. And then the opportunity for young people through online or through their diocese, they were given the opportunity to answer questions pertaining to them, their realities, how they see vocation, mission, and how they view their own selves. Then there was the pre-Synod gathering. So this pre-Synod gathering is after all the data and the written stuff was gathered together. The process here in America was, each archdiocese has to submit forms or submit their summary, and then that gets condensed down into basically a few pages and then sent to this pre-Synod gathering. I think it was in Ireland. I can't quite remember, but we had a representative, a young adult representative, go there. And then from there, in their talks and their discussions, a instrumentum laboris or a Synod working document was formed. Now, you can actually go back and look at this. And from that is what the actual Synod was using as, their working document. Like, what were they going to do and how things were going to look. So that happened in October of 2018. And lasted for several weeks. Coolly enough, that was also the time that Archbishop Romero came, Saint Archbishop Romero, in that same October stand. So that was really cool that they kind of coincided that way. They did that. We had, I think, 2 or 3 representatives who were young people who were able to go, known as non-auditor, in addition to several bishops. Really, be a part of the conversation. And then from that, they had the final document, which was given to the Holy Father at the end of that. So fast forward to a few months later, as Pope Francis is discerning document what's happened, what he's heard, he releases the Christus Vivit, his exhortation. After every synod, an exhortation is written. So we have Joy of the Gospel, we have Amoris Laetitia, which I forget the English name. And then now we have Christus Vivit, or Christ is Alive, that came from this particular document, released in April of 2019, which, I don't know, 2 years seems like forever ago, but it's, I don't know, still pretty fresh. And then present now, what phase we're in is implementation phase of Christus Vivit. So, I'll talk more about that later, but this is the general process of how the Synod went. I just wanted to go with this process because, I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with synodal processes, but this is kind of a a general idea how things are. Um, this is prior to the Synod on the Amazon, and um, obviously the Synod is supposed to have now, so a few changes are made that will happen in that Synod and the Synod that will happen on synodality, but it's very similar in ways, except there's extra steps in having a local process, and we're listening, as well as two working documents. So once the initial listening session is happening, there's a document which then comes back uh, to each region, revised and discerned, and then it goes back in order for them to have the Senate. So I guess they're learning from the processes that have happened previously and really allow the opportunity for everybody to be a part of it. But I like to think this is the first step in Pope Francis' process of really getting people to understand what a synodal church is. Like I said, Christ is alive, or Christ is vivid is his exhortation. It was written to young people, but it was also written to those who minister to him. So practically, he listed everybody, priests, adults, parents, lay ecclesial ministers, deacons, everybody. It's really written for. Now, does it mean that everybody read it or decided that there was something that was important? But this exhortation, like others, is really written for everyone. So I'm going to kind of take you through some of the important themes that are from the Synod and from Chris's vision. The first thing I'd like to, again, go back and say is what synodality is, or what Pope Francis explained it as. Say youth ministry has to be synodal. It should involve a journey together that values the charisms that the Spirit bestows in accordance with the vocation and the role of each of the church's members through a process of co-responsibility. Motivated by the Spirit, we can move towards a participatory and co-responsible church, one capable of appreciating its own rich variety, gratefully accepting the contributions of the lay faithful, including young people. No one should be excluded or exclude themselves. So I think his writings in Christus Vivid on synodality is really what inspired this next Synod. So it is, you'll probably hear a ton of times between now and 2023, journeying together, really building this co-responsible church where young people, as well as those not so young, are really driving action in which way the church goes. And there should be no one excluded. And you can often think about young people as no different than a marginalized group. And Pope Francis really wants to make sure that they are really participating in our church and not at the margins. What the Synod did itself to look as a model for what it wanted to do, or what it wanted things to look at, is they used the Emmaus model. Now, everyone's probably heard the Emmaus story of Jesus appearing on the road with his disciples, and them not knowing who he is, and him talking and answering questions as things happening. But what they would like to take away from this is that he asks them questions and listens patiently through a version of events. In his way, he helps them recognize what they're experiencing. Then, with affection and power, he proclaims the word to them, leading them to interpret the events that have experienced in the light of the scriptures. He accepts their invitation to stay with them as the evening falls. He enters into their night. As they listen to him speak, their hearts burn with them and their minds are open. Then they recognize him in the breaking of the bread. They then choose to resume their journey at once in the opposite direction, to return to the community and to share the experience of their encounter to the risen Lord. So recognize the experiences, interpret the events in light of the scriptures, then choose to resume the journey to encounter and experience things. Recognize, interpret, and choose. Miss Nancy probably laughing right now or
How do
thinking
you know?
hard, because that sounds very similar to something else that we like to use. And I will address that later. It's just very
Okay.
funny. It's very funny. Um, but yes, recognize, interpret, and choose is kind of the model they would like to have youth ministry as. So why is any of this important, you think Pope Francis like to say? So why talk to young people? So his basic thing is that young people have the power to keep us young as a church, to really looking at those injustices and keeping us on the right side. So take the side of the poor and the outcast and fight for justice, and humbly to let ourselves be challenged. It gives us renewed feeling of, and we're able to rejoice and look for better accomplishments, right? Like, being young means that I have dreams. I want to see the church in the world. And I would like to make sure those things happen. Sometimes when there isn't a renewal or a change, things get stagnated, things stay the same. But inviting a new and younger presence allows us to be renewed ourselves. And that's why Pope Francis thought this Synod was important. So the Youth Synod document and Chris's visit touched on a lot of things. I will not touch on everything. Definitely, I believe the vocations part for another day. But there are a few things based on our context, as you know, the peace and justice kind of conversation that you might be interested in hearing. First of them is the realities of some of the young people that were able to contribute to the Synod conversation. So here are some of the realities and concerns that we picked out that Pope Francis and the young people were talking about in this particular document. So this one is more of internal concerns of what a young person is. So intergenerational relationships. We'll touch on some, not all. Intergenerational relationships has been a very big part of this whole process of understanding and connecting the young with the old, figuring out what were the gaps, what were the issues, because there has been a lot of issues. There's been a lot of disconnect between generations, but also noting the importance of having intergenerational relationships and moving forward with that in whatever we do in terms of our ministries. Understanding one's sexuality and identity. They did acknowledge that young people are searching for answers and trying to figure out their own identities in regards to sexuality or who they are and what kind of people want to be. And I think it's a good job in encapsulating that point there, and then understanding that we have to be accompanying them along those journeys. Experiencing setbacks, disappointment, and doubt. It was noted that a lot of people either turn away from the church, not necessarily because of some things that the church has done, which is still a problem, but because they themselves did not feel like they were worthy to be in relationship in larger part. So, and this does happen, that they do doubt that their experiences or the disappointments in life that breeds this disconnect with God. They're not the same level. So it is acknowledged, and Pope Francis acknowledges these things, and then he basically told them, be not afraid of the issues that you face in life. Like, we will not turn you away. Please let us work on these things together, and we will importantly cry and keep the sorrow of young people that they have in our hearts, and let us not weep for the young. I think that's an important thing. He wants us to be empathetic to what young people are going through. Finding balance in life and work. As any young person will probably tell you, it's very difficult trying to balance what's happening with your job, in a lot of places where worker rights aren't necessarily the best. You're working long hours, not a lot of pay, but then trying to find the time to be a part of different things, ministry, of other movements, or even just experiencing time with your friends is very difficult. And ministers often complain that young people don't have enough time for church, or to come to this event or things like that. It's because they're often trying to find time to do those things. So acknowledging that point and really making sure young people express that point was something that was brought up in the Synod. External concerns, and I won't go over all these. So widespread violence, it was definitely noted in both documents that young people are often vulnerable to violence, whether it be, through, being exploited in like wars, fighting for wars, or being in gangs or in drugs and different things like that, that is an issue that young people face all across the world. And often, and in a lot of these external experiences often need to be addressed in order for us to move together in a more co-responsible way. So like in for this, like, if you're struggling day to day with knowing whether that you're going to be safe, or you have or don't have to do anything that would compromise yourself, that leads to other struggles in life. Marginalization and social inclusion, and young people are often a marginalized group. In many different countries, they are part of labor, which don't either pay them much because they are young. Migrants have to move from place to place because there are no jobs for them. This is a particular concern in Central America, where they've been moving north in order to find jobs. So being marginalized in work and in culture is a big point that was included. And social inclusion of, whether different groups of young people, because of their race, their culture, or other issues, was something that they want to make sure that was brought up in. And Pope Francis really understood this issue, and why he often wants people to know that nobody should be excluded from this larger conversation of where we are as a society. Pope Francis, yes.
Can we ask a question?
Sure.
In regards to the section that you just completed, in regards to no young people should be excluded, are there any clear words in Pope Francis's document that you're referring to that touches directly on LGBT Catholics?
No. He generally steers clear of this in his exhortation. It's noted in the Synod document itself that, like I said before, about exploring sexuality and in life today, and accompanying young people, but he himself does not really kind of elaborate on that in his particular exhortation.
Okay, thank you.
No. Let's see. Oh yeah, throwaway culture. And many of you know that Pope Francis loves to talk about throwaway culture. He's talked about throwaway culture in Laudato Si, in Fratelli Tutti, but belief that young people are vulnerable to throwaway culture through the influences of other parts of society, or just how the institution works, and that being an issue, likes to steer young people away from the idea of throwaway culture. And climate change was a big thing too, because more so than now than ever, young people are aware of the changes that are happening in climate, and it's become something of a great concern. this is just the quote from it of how young people want to be involved in what's happening in terms of concerns. So despite society's contradictions, they wish to use their talent, skills, and creativity to assume responsibility. So issues such as social and environmental stability, discrimination, is racism are some things that young people would like to address. But this might lead you down entirely new paths in order to, really address these issues. So potential of digital communication, political pressure, spread of lifestyles and models of consumption, investment, solidarity, and attentive environments, new forms of commitment and participation in society and politics, new forms of welfare in aid of the weakest. So for those of you who probably pay attention to anything that's been happening lately, like especially post George Floyd, a lot of young people are involved in the really pushing forward of the movement. So this will come as no surprise as young people in general, but Catholic young people want the same thing. Not to say that it's everyone, but it's being heard that these are some of the things that young people are caring about. I would hope one day this means that we actually put some time and effort into this as a church in working together on these particular things. One can hope, but it is on paper. Here, as you see, these are things that young people want active involvement in. So I'll stop right there for a little bit and I'll ask open forum questions now that you've kind of heard of some of these experiences and things. So 2 questions I would like to ask the room. What experiences that you had in working with youth and young adults on social issues? And what current realities and concerns for young people that were heard speak strongly to you?
Okay. Should we do this as a full group, Rudy? Or?
Yes, that's a full group, yes. For this part, yes.
Okay. Well, having worked and obviously I have to say that I have not had the opportunity to be working, at least in the past few years, with youth and young adults on social issues who are within the church structure. But I have with those who are not in the church structure. And, I find it very interesting that young people do have, some real ambition to tackle, some of the really serious problems in society. And sometimes, they can really excite, some of those of us who are older but don't have the same kind of energy. We can't always get out there and make a lot of noise and so on, but some of these young people will really do some good work and really thoughtful work and visionary work. But I've often wondered, I don't see them coming from our church. A few people maybe who volunteer for things like the Jesuit groups, the Ignatian volunteer, the Jesuit volunteers, and some of the other religious orders have Catholics doing things. At one time, there was papal volunteers, young people, but I don't see them, see a lot of people coming out of the parishes, youth coming out of the parishes, but I don't really see the youth in the parishes anymore. So my big question is, I think young people are really concerned and have real interest and empathy and want to do things. I think they see themselves divorced from the church in doing these things for the most part.
Wait, are you asking a question now, or are you just
Yeah,
saying a
that's my
statement?
observation. That's my
Okay,
experience lately.
okay. It's a fair
Anybody?
observation. It's a fair
Huh?
observation. It's
Yeah.
a fair observation, and I'm not saying it's unique to America, but and I guess I could talk about what I'm doing later, but it is definitely something that is an avenue missing for our church, a way that youth and young adults can deal with these issues in them being like a driving force. You know, there are avenues outside the church and other organizations where those who do feel like there are issues, that's what they go to. But nothing really the church drive outside of volunteer organizations like that. You know, those who like that work go to Catholic Charities or CRS or do those kind of work, but nothing sustaining, nothing like that specifically focused on the realities in their own lives. So yeah, it's an issue. Not going to say any more on that, but it's a fair observation.
You know, do others have observations about just from your experience? I'm wondering.
Yeah, this is Nancy, the other
Uh-huh.
Nancy.
Mhm.
Over the summer, I guess over the last year, I have had more of an opportunity to work more closely with our youth minister. And we are lucky enough to have a Mercy Corps volunteer at St. Francis. This has been a very challenging time for St. Francis. And both of these young women are highly educated, highly great energy levels, and really want to do things. The youth minister has been committed to the parish and has been taping our 5 o'clock mass since COVID started. She is sort of our technical person. The Mercy Corps volunteer is just so energetic. And it was determined, for instance, this year that in our school, we don't have a social justice class anymore. And don't ask me why, I have no idea. And we have always had a Mercy Corps volunteer sort of teach that class in our middle school. So basically those two gals said, well, we're going to do it this way. And they've put together a series of, I guess, seminars, presentations, and they'll do, you know, two a month on various topics within Catholic social teaching. And so they've got around it, so it's still part of the fabric of our parish. I see neither of them at Mass, except for the one that tapes the Mass. Our previous Mercy Corps volunteer was also extremely involved with our parish social justice work last year, but I never saw her at Mass either. So I think there is a disconnect. Like Rudy said, like Nancy said, these people, young folks, are they're very aware of what we are to be about and what we're supposed to be about, and they have committed their their lives to those things. But I think they have lost patience with the church, that capital C. That's just my take on it. The issue this year that they are putting forward, during the Peacemakers camp this summer, some of the older kids, the volunteers, determined that they were going to have a LGBT group to affirm those people that they knew within who were still Catholic or who thought they were Catholic, and to affirm those people within our parish, those young people within our parish. Whether we wanted to do it or not, they were going to do it. And they have been an inspiration to the social justice group and to the youth minister to put together a group that is very, that has embraced the all are welcome ministry. Now we're just obviously in infancy, but that is a concern of them, of theirs. And it seems to be a concern of kids who do not necessarily identify as gay or lesbian, but they want to be allies and friends of their friends. So I see the kids, a group of kids in our parish doing that, almost separate from the traditional things that are going on in the church. And we may be sort of in a unique position this year. I don't know.
Oh, interesting.
No, I do not think they are attending mass. I think they have had it with I don't think they are. No.
Right.
No. It's every time, they hear things like the bishops trying to deny communion to politicians, or, the focus on, as our beloved pastor used to say, the pelvic issues, as opposed to the greater fabric of the church. They get very upset, not upset, they just get tired of dealing with that. They think of it as being perhaps hypocritical.
I guess I would just say, oh, am I okay? Am I muted?
You're good.
Hear
You're
you.
hearing me? Okay. As a professor, I've worked with two kinds of people, and one would be graduate students. The other would be the love of my life was working with the freshman studies group. And that is where I could do it in the other classes too. But as far as youth go, working with these students, the best thing is that we found ways to talk about social justice, social issues, whether it was part of the curriculum or not, and how they embrace this. And when we found things to do, they were willing, they wanted to do, all kinds of things. We worked with the AWE, with the Siley Women's Enterprise. We worked with, they did things, collecting things. We sent, everybody would come, they'd come with ideas about this, but just like you, only the more conservative students seem to be churched.
Mhm.
And, and sometimes we'd get into little things about, some of those who were more conservative and what they were thinking, but those were the ones who really did church.
That's interesting.
And I'm not saying just Catholic, because even though Notre Dame's a Catholic women's college or university, it is very few of, I think 30% of our students are listed as Catholic.
I have two young adults in my household. My sons are 20 and 22, and they see that the church is just a bunch of old people, and is for older people, and that it's not really addressing current issues. So they don't really see the need for structured religion. One of them says, if I want to talk to God, I'm going to talk to God. And, I don't need all this other hierarchy and stuff that just makes it messy. They were happy to participate, especially the younger one, just because he's more social, in youth group activities at the church, but not church-wide activities. And that's sort of what I see throughout the parish, is if we have a really good youth minister, and if she says this is a youth activity, the youth are helping at this mass, then the youth will show up and she'll recruit them, but not really mixed in with sort of the general life of the parish.
Oh,
Rudy, how do you respond to the last three people's comments? Are there concerns in regards to what they've experienced at Notre Dame, St. Francis, and even in people's personal homes? Is that consistent with what you hear from your youth and young adult members?
I think you're asking the wrong question.
Well, Ask it the right way then.
Yeah, so you're asking, is it consistent with the ones that are pretty regularly attending and are faithful? And in some ways, the answer is yes. They have all these different concerns about the church and its lack of relevancy and how they treat people and things like that. But yet they still stay because of that connection, that community, that willingness to be a part of something larger. The question that you might want to hear, though, is that a issue that I hear with.
Uh-oh.
We lost you, Rudy.
Lost
Lost
you.
you. Rudy, where are you?
You're frozen.
This lack of relevance in life
Right.
has been a turnoff. How they treat LGBTQ community, how they treat people of different culture and races. These are all different concerns that young people have in, again, just straight up relevancy, of what does having have to do with my life. So yeah, that's the thing being heard. Like even before this, I think Youth Senate came out a document called "Going, Going, Gone," disaffiliation with young adults. Really talked about a lot of these different issues of why people have left the church. So it all kind of falls in line with things.
Rudy?
So
Yes.
what issues, Rudy, what new issues are going to be surfaced by the youth and young adults that haven't been surfaced at the last two Pope Francis and Pope John Paul groupings of all the young people from around the world? I mean, what has changed? Are there things that have changed in what's important to them? Has the church changed in the last 10 years, got worse and less inclusive to the issues of young adults?
All right, I'm gonna go back to the slide. Go back to this slide here.
Okay.
Environmental sustainability, discrimination, racism.
Yep.
New forms of commitment, participation in society and politics, new forms of welfare and aid of the weakest. Does this sound like the Catholic Church to you that really supports this?
Only in word.
So if this is what they want active involvement in, and this is what they're seeking to be a part of, then this needs to be the church, needs to be about. But publicly, what most people see, they hear abortion, they hear euthanasia, and that's about it. That's about it. All these other stuff, like even though a lot of different things happen in the church through CCHD and immigration that the church works on, seems to get pushed to the side in terms of public, what public see, what the public does, and really hears, and that messes things up. And oftentimes, then, even if there are other people working in this, it's these personal experiences in their churches that turn them off completely. Pastor said this, like you shouldn't be doing this. Pastor said this isn't the case. Pastor said if you're gay, that you're damned. Pastor says if you're a liberal, then you're going to hell. They hear these things.
They sure
hear
do.
these things, and that turns them off. So it's not as if they're saying that the church, what new issues have come up in that the church isn't dealing with. What has the church not been dealing with that's still around, that's still there, and that they find important is the question.
Yeah, I have a comment. I thought of, when you talk about gay and lesbian, I thought of Little Nas X, how he was originally Catholic, and he got turned off because their stance on gays and lesbians. He was like, they told him how to be, he should be shamed that he's gay and all this stuff. I was like, That's
Yeah.
stupid.
Right.
And yet, I don't know, we have to learn another way. If you come on Sunday, we have our lead meeting at St. Matthew and Blessed Sacrament. And we don't know how to bring the young people to our lead ministry for LGBTQ Catholics or non-Catholics or whatever.
Hmm.
Am I right?
You're right, Joan. It's become a safe place for adults to come, for moms and dads and grandparents to come, because their children don't go to church, but their parents and grandparents still do. They want their kids to come back. They know how the church has pushed them away. They've heard about Father Joe and St. Matthew lead ministry. And that's become, for those folks that are not part of it, we had over 20 people on the call from not just St. Matthew parishioners, they're from Pennsylvania and other parishes around the state, because they don't hear about LGBT in their parishes. And so they go to the website and they find about St. Matthew.
But none of those were young people.
No,
I mean,
not,
we
no,
have
no.
once in a while, a few people, and I just don't know what we need to do. Obviously, something to be
I
more
think the
relevant.
church-
Even like one of our people came originally with her daughter, who was in high school at the time, and now she's graduated from college. But her daughter came at the very beginning, and then just gradually stopped coming. And so even in that situation where the parent is involved, we aren't getting the, or the
Well,
same.
hold that
thing
question or
here,
thought.
the racial justice circle, same thing.
And I think the
Oh.
church needs the young people more than the young people feel like they need the church.
Amen.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, hold that thought in question. Did anybody have like any other thoughts before we kind of move? Because there are some other things I would like to get to, so we can help answer those questions. Okay. Then moving on. All right. So the important thing here is from the Synod to build co-responsible ministries. That's what synodality is about. That's what journeying together means. So it's just a little 1, 2, 3 method that I have. Again, it's just a guide to kind of help with that. It's by no all means a one size fits all, but at least a way to start entering lives of young people and really building something together. And because I think ultimately the thing why a lot of things we do fail into getting young people there, or not being either young people, just strictly young people, or older people being somewhere else, that we don't build things together. And it's either you come into my space and see what we have, or you come into this other side, but rarely is it ever building a space together where everyone feels safe and everyone feels like they're equally responsible when everything's happening. So how do we get there? So one, I would say enter in a relationship. The most important thing is to build trust with any person. Father Joe always talks about relationships, like ministry is all about relationships, and it's very much so with young people. It's just a little bit more difficult sometimes to get their trust. Depending on who it is, you might get everything. They're willing to speak on a number of different issues, tell you what they want, tell you what they need to do. Another set will be quiet and they won't say anything, and they really do have thoughts, but just based on the environment, if it's a large group like this, that they won't say much. So building trust, accompaniment, one-on-one relationships, doing things with them that we feel comfortable with. Like some of my best conversations are just like over, we're talking about something else and then other things happen, like music, or we're at an event and then they might steer onto a topic, and then we kind of really discuss it. Like I remember, I think I had a interesting conversations tutoring a bunch of my young people in SATs, and then they would have questions, and then they would ask me, so I would stop the tutoring and I would help answer the questions. Yeah, but it doesn't always have to be sitting down in a meeting asking them what they think about this particular thing.
Right.
Is a good way of entering that relationship. That might be the worst thing you could do, because they'd be like, man, they always asking me questions, I'm not coming back to that meeting, or they're always asking me what young people think for everybody, and that's a lot of responsibility anyway. Like, as a Black person, that's a lot of responsibility, and it's definitely a lot of responsibility on a young person. So being able to really allow them to be trustful of you and really grow in that is an important part. So, a number of different ways you can do that, but just always keep it light, keep it breezy at first, and then again, we can start to enter into other conversations that build to a more fruitful society. Stay in dialogue. Once you start in that relationship, doesn't mean that's the end, right? This is an important part of accompaniment, is staying in those fruitful conversations. What do you think about this? Not necessarily in a group, but just really just talking about it, or like, hey, this happened, it's interesting, right? Or just other different discussions that you can be having with young people to really kind of get their feeling where they are about things. And once you're in this kind of stage where you gain that trust, that might be an area where you can challenge them a little bit more. Like, you might want to do this to kind of help with that, or really help broaden their mind through helping them to learn. So staying in that constant dialogue with young people is a great way to move on to the next step. And they, once you've entered in a relationship with them and you've been engaging them in conversation, then you start to really think about, how do you send out yourselves as one? We often think of young people as depositories, where we put information in and hope whatever information that we put in, they turn out in our own groups or anywhere else, but that shouldn't be necessarily the case. We should be depositories as well. We need to learn to listen and to learn to hear what they're saying, and then also reflect and discern what they're saying in order to change our own way of doing ministry, externally or internally. If you're noticing that young people are not responding to what's happening in a particular meeting, then hey, kind of figure that out, or give them some responsibility to help to figure out which way the meeting is going, if that's a particular issue. I kind of like, hey, I've been a minister for a long time. I struggle through these things all the time. I pay attention to what's happening. I try to rearrange things. I'm asking questions, trying to figure out where to go. Always asking questions, always trying to figure out where things are going, but really creating that change to help help to create the change that we need. We have to go out as one, not as two separate bodies, where one is the dominating one and one is kind of the receiving one. So again, God said He won't work on every situation, just 3 things to kind of keep in mind. What can we do as adults? This goes by many different names. It could be a chaplain, it could be a companion here, this could be a accompanier, this could be a mentor, number of different titles for this kind of role. But it's really a person who is there for young people to help them along the way, their path in life. It's one of the big things that's being called for adults in from both the Synod document and from Pope Francis. It's belief in the ability of each young person to contribute to the building of society, church, and parish, to open to recognizing the special gifts and talents of each individual and commitment to assist them in developing as young adults and later in life, as youth as well, I'm sorry. A role of support, encouragement is always important. Make sure, you're encouraging them, they can do it, they have the ability to, and it's great. Listening role, offering advice or comments where necessary while taking responsibility. Not taking responsibility. And Emmaus model is what we're looking at here. And most importantly, being present. Sometimes if you're just there, you don't have to say anything and you're there to support and just around, that really means a lot. I tell you, they won't tell you that all the time, but later on they'll be grateful. You'll hear from a few of them, and thank you for being there. Thank you for listening to me in different things. So, and this isn't just for those who, work strictly in youth ministry. This is for all walks of life. This is for all the different social justice things you do. Like, how can you think about, being accompanying and being a companion for young people in this journey that you're doing in terms of different social justice activity. So you just kind of talked about how we look at growing with young people or building co-responsible ministry. But now we can talk about, this document has been out since 2000. Well, the Synod document's been out since 2018. The exhortation's been out since 2019. What has happened? I talked to you about these things. I may have talked to some other people, but nationally, is anything happening? Locally, is anything happening? What do you think?
I don't see it.
I haven't seen it, heard it,
All right.
except amongst ourselves talk.
All right.
I
So
didn't hear it now, Rudy, but I heard it back after Vatican II.
Vatican II.
Yeah,
Well,
that was a
really,
long
that
time
was-
ago.
I mean, after Vatican II was when we saw synodality in action. I think
Yeah.
it's where the church came alive, and social justice issues were part of everything. Not every church, but there were a lot of people who caught the flame, the fire, the whatever, the seed.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
So
I think that I just recently read that the Pope said something about he relates mostly, he came alive or whatever with Vatican II, and that he sees himself as a Vatican II.
Yeah, I
Catholic.
read that too.
oh, that's the secret, is that everything that Pope Francis do is basically implementation of Vatican II.
Yeah.
I think he said
everything.
that in that article, actually,
Everything.
yes.
Right. Yeah, he did say that. And one of the things that came to mind as you were saying, this sounds like Vatican II. Truthfully, there were a whole lot of young people who were, involved in the preparation for Vatican II then. And then
Ryan and I and Nancy, you were young then. Ryan and I were we were young people then.
And we were doing all of this and pushing the church then and pushing everything, now that I'm thinking about it, but then what happened to us after Vatican II? We got over.
I will stop you there. We can continue this later. But it was kind of a rhetorical question, slightly rhetorical question. I did wonder where you are, but there are things happening. You might not be aware of it. Of course, with all of this, the church moves slow. Slow.
We know.
Slow. All right, I can tell you this right. The Joy of the Gospel document came out in 2013. The bishops had a conference talking about that 3 years later. Slow. It's slow. So it hasn't even been 3 years since this document has come out. So where are we? All right. Pope Francis, I was explaining this before. Pope Francis says in the next step after the synodal process, the youth synod happened, is that for every Catholic leader beyond the norm, realize practical implications. How do we accompany young people, support of youth and young adult protagonists? Protagonist is a big term.
Yes.
This is, youth and young adults really steering where the ship is going, or the boat, canoe. We talk about the canoe leader, them being the primary person, set of people doing it. Increased dialogue and listening opportunities, because again, we're supposed to be listening. A significant renewal of ecclesial structures, parishes, dioceses, academic institutions, yada, 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 so that we must dare to be different, testifying to the beauty of generosity, service, purity, and the common good, love for poor, social friendship. Pope Francis is very wordy sometimes, but good stuff, but very wordy. So basically, we should be looking at, as all leaders of the church, doesn't matter what field, how can we allow these youth and young adults to be protagonists? And how do we change our institutions in order to be different, in order to be serviceable to the common good and to social justice activities, and to be more social, and to be brothers and sisters in Christ, right? So again, slow, that's what we're supposed to be doing. I don't think this message fully has gotten out to people. This is very funny. I this is why often my annoyance is that, hey, we're having this Senate that's supposed to be doing these things, but I'm like, our last Senate was supposed to be talking about these things. It's just an expansion of that. So let's get to this point of the last Senate. What's happening? All right. So simultaneously, while the Youth Senate was happening and Pope Francis's document, what was going on in America was two things. One, the Encuentro process is a large listening campaign of our Hispanic brothers and sisters all across the country, where there was one-to-ones, there was parish meetings and regional, and then eventually national gatherings, where is basically trying to take Pope Francis' Joy of the Gospel and evangelization to figure out, how do we do this? How do we do this as a population of Latinos and Latinas? That process concluded about a year and a half ago. I haven't read the full document, but it has a lot of good stuff, including its whole process of how it did it. It's very community organizing, like the style of it. It was really good. But in addition to that national dialogue, in addition to that, the Encuentro process was this national dialogue. So this is a collaboration between a number of groups: the USCCB office, the National Federation for Catholic Youth Ministry, national organizations like La Red, which deals with Pastor Juvenil, Hispanics, and a number of other youth and young adult organizations that kind of came together and says, we need to have a way we're able to listen to youth, young adults, and parents and families of young people to really encapsulate more what was said in about these specific issues. Because like I said before, even though those conversations happened in the United States in terms of the Youth Senate, it was all condensed down to this little forum. So having more robust data and allowing for more conversations to happen was kind of what this national dialogue was all about. The final report was released in 2021. I think that was about June or July. I don't know why, I can't remember. After conversations with 10,000 participants. So that was parishes having conversations at the very local level, regional things at different conferences, both participated things at the parish level and at a national conference. Then they compiled all what they have into how the data, as well as who they got the data from. Surprisingly, it wasn't a ton of people who weren't a part of the church, even though that was kind of a group that was supposed to fall in. It was mostly people who are participating, but it is what it is. And yeah, so here are some key findings, at least again, in this arena that you might find interesting. So first key finding, like it's the first thing you see: more intentionally connect the life of faith with lived experiences of young people. Miss Nancy, does that sound familiar to you?
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, I'm glad they figured that out. I'm glad they figured that out.
Right.
Yes. The second one is we need to do more synodal listening to one another. Yes, gotcha. Sure. Address the authenticity gap, and if you'll give me a second, I'll actually read what that says.
That's reality.
It is. So this authenticity gap is, okay. I'm losing it. So the National Dialogue revealed the church needs to show more empathy and authentic engagement with the young rather than empty platitudes or impatient judgment of the young and disaffiliated. Very big point. They know when you're fake, know when you're trying to get them just to get in their pews, and they won't have it. So if you really want to, actually be in dialogue and actually care, like you have to show some actual empathy of what's happening. So that was a big point. And increased investment in accompaniment, like I talked before, what that means, and embrace complexity. This is also an important point I think they mentioned, because of the plethora of findings from the data, recognizing the needs of young people, families, and the leaders are so vast that there is no one size fit all approach that can be taken. Rather, leaning into this complexity is highly recommended. So what works in your neck of the woods at your parish or works in the suburbs ain't gonna work for that city parish who has a multitude of other issues they deal with, because there are other realities that have to be addressed first. So know that young people are complex. They're not all the same, do not all think the same. So figure out what that looks like and what that means, and then begin to start address that accordingly. So, so that what was said. That is what the data was gathered, and this is what's happening from that. So you might not also realize this because it was kind of, I wouldn't say snuck into the bishops' meeting. It was definitely mentioned, but because other things they were preoccupied with, you probably didn't notice this was happening. So there's been a group who's been working on this national framework for youth and young adults. So this national framework is going to give more guidance to basically all what is said in the Youth Synod document and in Christus Vivid, in order to help parishes, regions, dioceses to really implement what has been said and to really help accompany young people. It was voted on that they finally can go through with creating the document at the June meeting. And then I believe in the November meeting, that framework should be revealed to the bishops in Baltimore. So that is something you should look out for, what that pastoral framework on youth and young adults look like. It might be something you want to bother your own archbishop to see what he's doing about.
Could I ask a question on that, Rudy?
Yes.
Who are the ones who are the bishops or their staff, I suppose, doing this national pastoral framework?
So it's part bishops, parts like, bishops are always going to be there because it's USCCB.
Right.
Part staff who staff that particular part. Like the youth and young adult section of the family life, the marriage family life.
Right.
And then there's other lay people they get that are part of.
How many young people?
I believe majority of the people on that national framework are either young adults or work strictly with young adults. It's like, I think half and half. I'm not totally sure on everybody on the committee because it's not open. I know people on the committee and they're good people. I'm just saying, I can say that for sure.
Yeah.
So in addition to that national pastoral framework that they're working on, what's also happening is the Journey Together process with young adults. So if you haven't heard of the Journey Together process, it's bishops and the USCCB offices of young adults and different cultural offices have been having regular meetings with bishops, where young people are able to speak about the cultural realities of their own lives, of what things are important to them. So there are different phases of that. So we had a initial meeting where everyone gathered, young adults, bishops. They kind of have a initial, I guess, kickoff of this. This happened back in 2020, the summer of 2020. Then there were intra conversations where different cultural groups, young adults, were meeting to talk about culturally things that were important to them. Then there were intercultural meetings where everyone kind of gathered together over a series of once a month of young adults. Each a different culture for each month would tell the different other young adults and those who work with young adults and the bishops, things that are important to them, mostly stemming from their previous conversations. And now we're entering the phase where a document is going to be written up of what the previous phases are to really help people, look at what that was. I am very fortunate to be on at least one of the writing teams. And I can just tell you I can't tell you what's in it, but I can tell you that what was written on, at least for our part, is very good. So you should be look out for that eventually. I think it'll be done sometime early next year. And then the next phase is that we'll all meet in person. We're supposed to, crossing my fingers, next summer in Chicago, young adults, bishops, to really gather and to delve more deeper in these conversations. Now, it hasn't necessarily been the best process. I don't hear anybody say that, but it's definitely something where you can get bishops in the room and hear young adults speak on their different cultures and what it means to them. Not every bishop has participated, something in which our papal nuncio would have liked to see and has said to them, but there has been a decent participation by many bishops. So that's continually going on the national end. And this one I can tell you because the National Federation of Catholic Youth Ministry, this is just more in terms of implication of things. There's a anti-racism, used to be rapid response team. Now we're trying to transition over to a full-time project team in which we are able to work with young people on anti-racism efforts. Most of you have seen the videos of, the youth and young adults talking about racism, them on their own, what the issues of racism were, what they would like to see. And then there was a second one where they came up with the questions of that, they wanted to ask the bishops of various diverse backgrounds, and then they facilitated the conversation through another webinar, and we're able to ask those questions and be in live dialogue with them. Well, we would like to see those things going forward. So while it's not official, there will be a sub-team specifically designed to work with young people on youth-driven content. So different webinars or different media avenues in which young people are able to speak directly about the issue of racism or do something about racism will be coming out from the NFCYM. So allowing them to be the drivers of what happens in this particular field. In addition to that, I don't know if I put it on the next slide. I did not. So locally, what that means is that, I guess I took it off, is that also part of this project team, a pilot project is going to be at play. I think I've told some of you, not all of you, in which those who work with young people, youth ministers, members of the diocese, Bishop Bruce, and eventually, hopefully the larger, not only faith communities, but communities that the young people belong in, are going to work with young people in which they are the primary people running it, trying to drive action in pertains to racism. Right now, we're at the very beginning stage, seeing, which churches have had conversations about racism, have talked to their people about their young people about racism, how comfortable youth ministers already feel. See if we need to do some prep work there, and then coming back to them, making sure that they're comfortable with racism, and then bringing on young people as a part of our core team, working in regions with the young people, really asking them what do they want to see done, and then organizing an effort and doing anti-racism work with those from the diocese. So we're the first pilot diocese to do this. Baltimore is going to be the guide into doing this work so that other dioceses could look at our diocese and say, this is how you work with young people on this particular issue. How do we be co-responsible in anti-racism? So hopefully the full document guide should be done by September of 2022. Again, hoping and praying so that anybody can read and see what happened through the process. And I'm also hoping that all of you will be part of this particular process, helping to be there, accompanying and helping them along the way. But that is happening currently ongoing through the National Federation for Catholic Youth Ministry as a kind of co-sponsor to our diocese. Anybody have any questions about that? You're on mute, Mr. Ryan.
Yes, while you were talking, I looked at the document that's on the website of the Archdiocese, and I'm referring to the Journey to Racial Justice, the Coordinating Council that Bishop Bruce Lewandowski is in charge of.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see anything very, very clearly stating youth and young adult ministry. You can tell me I'm wrong, it's included in one of these, but I don't see it. So that's one question. The second question is that in conversations we've had over the last couple of years, I've asked you about the 135 or whatever number of parishes we have in the Archdiocese and the different pastorates that have been created. How many of those pastorates or parishes have full-time paid youth ministers? And I asked the question because you talk about being authentic to the young people you're working with. They know the difference between the truth and not the truth. And it's awful hard to say to them that we're making a commitment to you, but we don't have a minister designated for that work in this particular parish. How do we get around that?
Well, okay. Let me figure out which one to answer first. So I answered the first one. So no, there is nothing in particular to youth and young adults that's part of what they're doing. But I made sure I had a conversation with Bishop Bruce to say, this is happening, this is what we want to do. We want you to be a part of it. And that as we move along with things, what we do will be integrated in what that pastoral team on racism does. So there's going to be some synergy behind it. This is why important that he's well caught up with what we're doing, even if it's not there on paper of those. Like all the people who are part of that are staff. Like I'm not staff, or the youth ministers aren't staff of Catholic centers. So we're doing something in tandem with them, but not necessarily something that's there. So you're on mute. You should mute yourself.
You should be on that. Curtis is on this. He's on it as a member of a school, a school administrator.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's Catholic schools, Joni.
Steph.
Yeah, but
Catholic
I
schools.
just think that it's a little crazy that Rudy, that there isn't something on that group. It seems like we're talking about schools and we're talking about all the different places, and maybe that piece of the puzzle is missing, and they should acknowledge it. And
Ms. Sue, did you raise your hand? Something?
Yeah, I just was thinking just in our own pastorate, for those of you who are not aware, but I wonder if we have not enough of youth ministers because there's not enough adults that are experienced, trained. I don't know, Rudy, if that's the case, but for those of you who aren't familiar with Doris, Doris Van Gaal recently took another job, and she's graciously helping out still with the young children with the sacraments and such, like with you, with Rudy. But I'm wondering, just like there's not enough mental health counselors in the for the 70% of young people that say that they have some, mental health issue. I'm wondering if that's the case. Rudy, do you have a sense of that? Because I was thinking of what Ryan asked.
All right, I can answer this question fairly, I would say easily. I don't know. I don't have the exact number of how many youth ministers are in the Diocese of Archdiocese of Baltimore. That's a very difficult one because especially lately, there has been a lot of turnover with youth and young adult ministers. There are not a lot of young adult ministers to begin with. I usually do slasher roles, but youth ministers, there's been a lot of turnover. And this comes to the reason why there aren't necessarily a lot, in that there's a totem pole of, I would say, respect, but priority we give ministers in the church. We must have a priest is at the top. And usually if there is another staff person, they're either a pastoral associate or director of religious education or coordinator of religious education. Like, they're generally, if you have enough money, you're going to make sure you got your pastor, of course, but that's just anything. And you got somebody teaching religious ed, because you got to have somebody forming the kids, right? Youth minister is right at the bottom, with maybe parish life directors these days in terms of priority. They're often the ones who get the least amount of pay, who work a lot of hours, and who aren't necessarily respected the most for their job. So this kind of drives them to burn out really fast. It used to be at least half of youth ministers, if not more, would burn out within the first 5 years. I think that number has gotten lower in the last 5 years. I've seen ministers that, all the people that I went to youth minister orientation with 4 or 5 years ago, I think it was, 5 years ago, there are only 2 remaining. Everyone else is out of ministry. It is a vastly, either they have to go on to, either they go on to teaching, or they go on to being a faith formation director, or they just completely drop out of ministry. Most of them are just like not doing ministry at all. That's something. But it's not often a position that gets this proper support needed to survive and thrive within the ministry world. This is something I think that the lay ministers, at least at the national level, have been trying to advocate for in terms of giving them stability and some support. I'm not sure how successful they are yet. And then, of course, as you want to grow in families, again, because of money, they have to move on to different things. But there are a significant number of people who have experience. I wouldn't say a significant number of color who have experience, to tell you that. There are 3 youth ministers in the Archdiocese of Baltimore. One does youth ministry and faith formation. So that's an issue in of itself. But there are a number who are youth ministry trained, but it's just the environment is so that they don't often last, and so they go somewhere else.
So is it fair to ask, Rudy, where is the commitment to the youth and young adults within the Baltimore Archdiocese? Is that a fair question to ask?
I would say my question is, who are you asking that from? Who do you asking the commitment from? You like the Archbishop,
Well,
or
that's
just
the
like a
question.
larger?
I mean,
Um,
does it have to go up to the Archbishop? Does it have to go to the individual pastors? I don't know who's
Yeah.
being held accountable, but our youth and young adults don't have the type of leadership that you're giving our group, Rudy, and we're blessed to have you. But what about all these other parishes?
I don't know, but of course I have to work for many different churches through to, churches generally in urban areas don't have the money. So, which is why I am the only full-time youth and young adult minister in Baltimore City. Other churches go through this same struggle of little to no pastoral support. I'm not sure how to solve the money issues needed to have someone there. And then even if you solve the money issues, then ask, well, we're going to put out this certain money for a ministry we don't believe is worth our time in spending that kind of money. It's a lot of layers there that hopefully I think one day we can get to. And I try to bring it up in regional conversations, but we haven't gotten there yet.
I was just going to comment that as we are talking and discussing this, that I myself think that we need to think of church differently in reaching out where the young people are and where those in the margins are. And it makes me think back to a time where my family, we had a reunion type thing one summer, and this my uncle, we were at his place, and all of us were there. And of course, we being the Catholics that we are, we wanted to be we wanted to have mass because it was a weekend. And my uncle actually brought a priest that he knew to the family home, and we had mass there. And I think as I'm learning more about the synod and the origins of how things were in the beginning, and reading more of the Acts of the Apostles and the small, what I forget, Father Joe or somebody said, it's like the church, the small, church gatherings in the beginning. I'm not trying to advocate for, this completely, because I haven't clearly kind of processed, because the devotion of the Eucharist and the priest, the role of the priest, I think is necessary and should be honored. But I just kind of think that events like that, where you're gathered together with people who, are doing things that are good for the world, whether they be, social actions, that we rethink the possibility of having mass there as, in the middle of it or at the end of it, or whatever the process is that I'm envisioning. And like I said, this is part of the synod, and this is kind of where the Holy Spirit's kind of got me going here. So I'm just sharing what that might look like. I think that the pandemic took a lot of us away from each other, and I don't want that to be the case. In fact, I find it very hard not to be with people. So I'm a people gatherer. And I think that doing things with young people, I've mentioned some ideas with Rudy. He knows a little bit about, the idea of really connecting our young people with the social justice issues, like, visiting together with the Racial Justice Circle, I'm blanking. Why am I blanking? Because I'm having a senior moment. Rudy, you might remember the Underground Railroad, Harriet Tubman's, place with young people, and and kind of still building those things where you have certain things that young people like to do, but you're also connecting to generations of people and those actions, and thinking about doing that, and yet having mass together and really, breaking bread. So anyway, that's just something that I feel like, going out to people is getting more and more a theme in my brain here.
Yeah, I would just affirm that multi-generational ministry is going to be very big going forward. Many churches have made the transition to more small group gatherings, not necessarily large group, but doing small group in homes or in other spaces and doing things with young people, and that's been very effective, as long as, of course, you have proper small group leaders. And what was the last thing I was going to say? Shoot, I lost it that fast. Yeah, being able to accompany young people in different ways, really helping to fill in the gaps is going to be our ticket. They're really moving things forward in all of our ministries. And I want to be mindful of time because it is after it's after 8:40. Good Lord. See, we get 10 people and we last longer than 8:30. See, that's what happens. But you're still here, so that's good, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna skip the next one about acting together. It's kind of more what I said earlier. I just want to put this up there because it's not going to be a meeting you got with me, and I'm not going to talk about C-Judge Act method. All right. So if you haven't seen it, this is a big key into how we do a lot of this ministry, right? In terms of making our young people the protagonists of their own ministry, of really doing acts of justice based on their realities. C-Judge Act method, developed by Joseph Cardine, Belgian bishop, who established Youth Christian Workers, or YCW, back in the 1920s. Many other movements based on him, Youth Christian Students, other Cardine movements. The Christian, I always made it mixed up. Is the Christian Family Movement, right?
Yeah.
Okay, not Catholic Family Movement. Either way, at the basis, they use the C-Judge Act method as a way to bridge the gap from our faith, what should be happening in our everyday lives. The reality, which we want to go back to this slide. Connecting the life of faith to the lived experience of young people. Boom. I don't know why they had to write that when we already got the methodology right there. But it is what it is. But see reality in our own lives, to judge reality in light of the gospel values, and to act to create the change between what is happening. That's also very familiar because if we go back to the early slide here, recognize, interpret, choose, different words, same exact thing. So we all on the same page, Pope Francis, all of us, we all good. But if it's something you like to look at in terms of, if you allow a space for young people to do social justice activities, it's a great methodology to kind of move forward in that, to act on individual things, but as a collaborative as well. It's the basis of our high school movement. This is what we do once a month. We have meetings based on the C-Judge Act method. And ultimately in the next spring, again, barring any setbacks from COVID, we should have the first real big action step that they are able to come up with and work on with the help of others. And this is the last thing I have, because I'm going to ask the next questions. During the Synod, this is from Pope Francis and Chris's Visit, one of the auditors from Samoan Islands spoke of the church as a canoe, which the elderly help keep on course by adjusting the position of the stars. While the young keep rowing, imagine what waits for them ahead. Let us steer clear of young people who think that adults represent a meaningless past, and those adults who think they know how young people should act. Instead, let us all climb aboard the same canoe and together seek a better world with constantly renewed momentum of the Holy Spirit. Now, this is the last question, really, what vision that you have your sea canoe going, but won't answer that question. Just keep that in your head, discern what vision do we have together that you see us riding the canoe, young people and as adults together. Let's see what you might come up with. All right. Any last questions?
You know, Rudy,
Yes.
as I'm listening to you, what really strikes me is that what young people are looking for in the church is very similar to what a lot of current church parishioners are looking for. And they're the ones, when they're not finding it, who are leaving the church.
Mhm.
If we had them being a stronger voice in the church, and I guess the question is, you know, why don't we find it there? Is it because there is something in the hierarchical structure that is not letting these issues be in the forefront of our daily church life? I don't know.
Well,
Yeah.
so I think that's the connection between this synod and the next synod. And clearly there is this issue of what the young people said, and ours is very similar to all the other parishioners. So how can we properly create a church that is co-responsible when those who do have these issues aren't being heard? And so this is why we're going to go about hopefully doing it right, these listening sessions with the Synod process and hearing them. And hopefully our hierarchy are able to listen and properly implement what is being said to really give those who need to a larger voice in everything that's happening. So I'm praying that this Synod can be a great connection to the Youth Synod, and in both of them that voices will be heard, responsibilities will be shared. I'm not sure how hopeful, I'm not going to tell you how much percentage I'm hopeful of that, but I am hoping that happens.
So somehow we have to support youth who want to be the protagonists. And how many are so discouraged that they just don't care. But there are young people, and I suppose, yeah, there are young people who do care about, you know, the issues of life, and they're aware and they have a vision as to how to do something about it. And we have to somehow make sure our church supports these young people, because, you know, the church can be very helpful to them. And, you know, in turn, the rest of the church benefits from these young people who have that vision. So how do we support these young people, the protagonists out there, who are trying to make, you know, a different world? And I guess I'm thinking about post-pandemic. We've seen so much during the pandemic, and we know we don't want to go back to what we saw before the pandemic, exactly because there was too much wrong. So how do we, and I think young people are saying that. So how do we support them as Catholics, as a church? We are the church, even if the hierarchy doesn't believe it, we are. I think the hierarchy believes it somewhat. How do we, you know, I'm thinking of the groups of young people who are sleeping, you know, down in Annapolis overnight because they're protesting the fact that there's money to help people so they don't get evicted, but the money hasn't been released to help people. And there are a lot of young people who are down there sleeping overnight in protest. I don't want to do that, but I'm sure glad they're doing it.
I don't think you have to, Ms. Nancy. I mean, there's just a number of different avenues of, you know, accompaniment. Like there's no one way of doing it. So I mean, it's why we have so many like youth sub teams now. You can help them plan stuff, you can get stuff, you can support them, financial means. There's just a number of different ways that, you know, you can think of supporting any of these particular causes. Like I think if you think of young people, youth and young adults as any other marginalized group, like think of it like a racism issue. Think about all you do to affect the institutions in which you want to change into anti-racism. Think about those and then kind of transfer it over to young people. All right. These are the issues that young people face. All right. Then what are then the avenues that in which I can help with this? So, and in terms of like racism, there are a number of different ways. Like some of you help out with housing, some of you help out with advocacy in different avenues. Some of you contribute financially to different organizations that help with different things. And that's the same way with young people. So and ultimately, like, even if you're not at that level yet, just find one young person you can connect to and just really listen to them and figure out what their needs are. I think that's probably the biggest thing you can do, just a connection to one young person and really have a bead on, you know, what's going on in their lives, even if it's not necessarily something that you agree with or like, but, you know, just really being there. Because unfortunately, I cannot be there for all the young people that even I minister to now. It's difficult and it's not fair to them. So need as much people as possible making those connections. And as you know, I like to make connections with older people too. So being there to making those and then figuring out what we can do together and deal without. So like, I think that's the biggest support you can do is really just, you know, just being there.
Rudy, you've got so much on your plate. I hesitate to make the suggestion, but I think, speaking for myself, we need you to help us marry our good interests with a young person. I personally don't know of any young folks that I should be sitting down and having an open and honest conversation, creating a dialogue with them. A Call to Action National has put together a mentoring program of the Vatican II Catholics to talk to the young regeneration people that are joining Call to Action because of some of its social justice work. And Joan and I are working in partnership with a young woman down in Washington, D.C. And we created a relationship with her, a friendship, but we needed that third party to create that mentoringship. You know, if you've got a dozen or 15 or whatever, and I'm not sure about what goes on at Nancy's parish in regards to St. Francis, but if you've got a group of people and you'd like to marry them up with some adults that you've got faith in and don't think we're too crazy, then I think we would love to do what you're suggesting we do. But you're going to have to help us get together.
Yeah, I got you. And helping to create that space is something I can do. I'd say it oftentimes as I remember it, but I will come back to making sure at least some of that happens, of creating that space. So wait, Ms. Nancy, did you have something to say?
I think it would be, I don't know if you've had any dealings with Amelia Voos, but I think she is out there sort of fighting the good fight in dire circumstances that we find ourselves in. And also, you know, just trying to rebuild a youth group and make it relevant, because we believe that if we don't keep these kids, these young folks, they're searching for things. They're searching for spirituality. They're searching for meaning. And if they can't find it in our church, they'll find it somewhere else. And as soon as they're in high school and gone through finished high school, we'll lose them. And I just think that we need to support any of the, however many, if they're 5, 6, 7, however many youth ministers. You know, shame on the Archbishop for not funding these positions. It's again, a lot of empty noise from the hierarchy. Empty, empty, empty. And no one, and the kids see it and they know it. And some of the old folks see it and know it too. But yeah, I hope you can connect with her somehow.
Yeah, definitely as things change here, I think it'll be more and more important that I connect with Amelia. So that'll be something I do.
Okay.
Nancy, is she a paid person or is she a volunteer?
She's a 30-hour-a-week person. Yeah.
Paid by St. Francis?
Yep. Now she is this year under our old pastor. I don't know what'll happen, next year.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful commitment.
It certainly, well, yes, it was.
Yes, it was, and hopefully it will be.
Yeah, well, and she does a lot of work for the parish. Part of her 30 hours, as I said, she's done the technology, she's updated our website, and she does the, when we were doing masses, and well, we still are doing a mass online. So she does all that too. She is one of those people that works a lot of hours.
Kind of like Rudy.
Kind of like.
Kind of like Rudy.
Right.
Rudy, do you know we all love you? You know that, don't you, Rudy?
You are irreplaceable.
So
Okay. I hope you feel it. I hope you feel the love, Rudy.
Oh, thank you. I don't know where the future is going to lie or how things have changed, but I mean, I'm often thankful for all of your support in being able to do what I can for the community. So and thank you for coming out tonight. I don't say this is closing, but yes, thank you for coming out tonight. Thank you for hearing this. Obviously, I'm gonna stop the recording button now.